It is so important within growth marketing to stay on top of trends in the industry, changes. And there's a wonderful community of influencers, thought leaders who, their career is making sure they stay on top of this.
I use LinkedIn as a bit of a sort of dip test of what's going on. So if you scroll through your feed a few times a day, if something's bubbling up, if there's a sort of hot topic, you'll soon know about it quickly.
I would say that what used to be my mainstay and is still kind of the core of what I look at are the industry bodies, both newsletters and the .com sites and the research that they put out. So I'd say that's stuff like eMarketer, Digiday, IAB, TechCrunch, Forrester, everything from the market research that's being put out to kind of the forecasts and the predictions that are being made about the industry. That I look at all the time.
And make sure that you either create a silent social account if you don't use X, for instance. You don't need to use it, but just make sure you're tracking on X, maybe on Threads. Threads is now growing in terms of where there's a lot of thought leadership, Discord, etc. Get on those platforms. Make sure that you're following the influencers to hear what they're thinking about the latest trends.
You've obviously got some of the key blogs, and there's quite a few of them. Search Engine Journal's one of them. Ginny Marvin, who's on Twitter, Google Ads Liaison, is the other sort of title that she has. Very important to follow her because she'll be the first to announce changes to the Google Ads platform.
Yeah, CACI e-consultancy, they put out some great white papers, and they're all categorized into specific areas like future-proofing, like cookieless. Just go and read, and they'll break everything down. I
also obviously read the industry press, again, really important, but also looking more broadly at the wider business press and what's going on in the world, because obviously everything then rolls back and it impacts our industry.
If you're willing, Feedly is fantastic. So Feedly is a space where it's an RSS feed. So go and find the publications that matter. There are lots of valuable publications and newsletters out there. You can pull them all into your RSS feed and wake up. And when you start work, 15 minutes every day, check it out.
I'm a very, very big podcast listener because, I like to listen on my walk into work every morning, and then I feel like I have a primer for my day. So, shout out to eMarketer Behind the Numbers. I really like Marketecture. If you want to get quite, in the weeds and figure out what is really going on with third-party cookie deprecation, love Marketecture. I also like Morning Brew Daily or the Emerging Tech Brew newsletter series because it's a bit more bite-sized.
And reach out on LinkedIn, look at what people are saying. Often they'll drop articles that will just break things down, bite-sized info, and then from the back of those, you can say, okay, this is really interesting. I've got a question here. Let me go back to either the person that posted it. I mean, as people in data, as people in technology, we love answering questions. Don't be afraid to reach out, network. So yeah, those would be my recommendations.
Reach out to people who have jobs that look interesting to you on LinkedIn and really expand your network. Focus on that. Learning from other people that are sort of in an area you want to learn from, get some mentors. Because this industry is evolving so rapidly that by the time it trickles down to the education system, they're teaching stuff from a few years ago. And so, you want to talk to people who are actually in the industry and who know what it's like at the cutting edge.
But yeah, the other one is talking to people, having a beer, and knowing people in the industry who've tried stuff and succeeded, who failed. I do that. I've got a few people who I've worked with for years and years in the AdGrow team, and some of them outside. And yeah, I'm lucky to have that. But they're always learning, they're always testing, and you're the amount of knowledge I've got, the amount of money I've made for clients just from having a beer.
There's plenty of events that are talking about hot topics, and just going out and talking to other people in industry, in different industries, and gives you a lot, a lot of insight into what's going on.
Events, like industry events. So either going to them or just reading about them, like coverage from New Fronts, coverage from Cannes. Because if you think about that, that's like, what does every company want you to know about them? Like, what are they saying is going to be big, next year? Which means like, if you're listening to coverage of HubSpot's conference or Google's, like, it means that they're planning for that in their bottom line. They're staking a real bet on it. And then lastly, talking to customers, and that could not be more important. Talking to customers, talking to partners like yourselves. Like I work in the partnership remit and speaking to partners about Adverity. What are you seeing in the industry? What are your customers and our joint customers caring about? And then getting FaceTime with those customers, or if there's any recordings from customers. We have, we use Gong at LinkedIn, so I can kind of listen to customers speak in their own words about like, I'm frustrated with this and I need to drive this outcome and this tool isn't working for me. That really adds that, like, talk about like human EQ, approach to designing strategy, right? It's like, why does somebody want what they want and what is sufficient to meet their needs? I think you have to get to the customer level and you can't just read about it.
When it comes to resources, so when I first started my career and I used to live day and night just coding, I lived on Stack Overflow. So that's one of my favorite resources to always go to. The community there is very broad. You've got ample questions that have been asked. So if you ever have a question about coding, about an algorithm, about an optimization to make on Python, PySpark, Scala, SQL, you'll most likely find that someone has had a late night there and they would have written an answer to it. I'd say figure out if you want to do any hackathons. There's DataKind, I believe, in London. I'm not too sure if they've expanded outwards, and you can go to those kind of communities and do some, data for good for charities pro bono. And also check GitHub. GitHub is fantastic for just repos of beautiful code. I like to call code beautiful because sometimes it can be. And as opposed to you spending your hours trying to figure it out from scratch and being slightly stressed, you can definitely just find it, see if you can replicate it and see how you can optimize.
I mean, from a hands-on guy, I always want to be up to date with scripts. Just because there's just tons of nice shortcuts and cool things in there. It's just a bit of a toy box. But B, it also aligns with how kind of the bleeding edge, the real thought leaders are thinking, because that's the first outcome is you get a great script. There's some scripts out there that pull apart Performance Max, which is one of these new campaign type that Google's kind of taken a lot of control away from the advertiser. So that, and that gives you a lot of that back. So I definitely always want to know, even if I wasn't the person doing the hands-on optimization, even if I was, on the client side and the marketing manager, the marketing director, I still want to kind of know what's out there. How are those guys thinking? Because that would at least allow me to ask the right questions and look at what can be automated, what can be scaled.
Looking to see who's out there in spaces where it's not necessarily in the space that I support, but where I can get new ideas and say, hey, here's what's going on in the fintech area. They're solving issues that, kind of sort of sound like what I am looking at in certain realms. So how do you kind of translate, and how do things that people are doing in places that aren't just like you, how do you translate those and pick up nuggets that you ordinarily wouldn't pick up just kind of playing in your own sandbox?